Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Harris, and this is the Harris Effect. This is episode number 1, numero uno, the first one I've ever done on this channel. And just to kind of preface this talk today, kind of wanted to tell you why I created this channel. I have my Relentless Forward Momentum website where I publish a lot of personal development content. And I kind of wanted to separate some of my more recent content from that personal development type stuff because it's I'd say it's a little bit conflicting in nature. So I wanted to just have another outlet to be able to share my ideas and perspectives on things. But this channel is really going to be about protecting our freedom here in America, protecting our individual rights that we have living in this amazing country. Because I feel like a lot of what's going on in our country right now is threatening a lot of our liberties, and it's scary. And I see people voluntarily giving up rights and not questioning things and not challenging the narratives that are being pushed by the mainstream media. And that is the intent of this channel. So I'm going to publish a lot of content that's going to be highly controversial, probably going to upset some people, and that's okay, because I love this country and I love what it stands for, and I love that I have the freedom to pursue my own happiness, and I want to defend that as best as I can, and I want to make sure that my kids and my grandkids have that same opportunity that I have right now. So that is going to be the intent of this channel. And first episode, I'm going to be reading a blog that I wrote this morning. Actually, I wrote a couple days ago, but I'm just finishing it up this morning. So I'm going to be reading that blog. And if you're new to this channel, which everybody is, since I said it was the first episode, do me a favor, do yourself a favor, hit the subscribe button, and then you can hit the bell to turn notifications on, so you get notifications when I do publish a new video. And my goal is to get to 100 subscribers by the end of July. Don't fail me. So I'm going to be reading this blog starting right now. And yeah, I would love some comments, feedback in the comments section, and we can kind of start a discussion. So here we go. Systemic racism, just another leftist lie. The cruel reality is that we do not have a systemic racism problem in America. The issue isn't racism at all. It's simply a buzzword being promoted by the mainstream media to drive a wedge between us and push the agenda of an expanded welfare state, which claims to eliminate poverty, but is actually the biggest culprit in its perpetuation. But that's something I'll dive into in a future post. Back to the topic at hand, systemic racism. I guess if the media promotes something adamantly enough, people will begin to believe it. And that's exactly what's happening. But as I promised in some previous discussions, let's look at some facts to dispel this notion of systemic racism. The biggest target right now in the USA for this claim of systemic racism is the police force. So I want to take a deeper look at them in particular. The media has taught us that as an institution, the police force unfairly targets Black people and only Black people. White people never fall victim to being unfairly targeted. This must be an instance of systemic racism, right? Wrong. Let's first challenge the premise. If I say that men commit more violent crimes than women by quite a large margin and can prove it, you would accept that as a fact, right? Well, here's the proof that this claim is true, and you can find the link in the blog. So if more men commit violent crimes, isn't it only logical that they are arrested more frequently for these crimes? I think it's safe to assume yes. So is the police force targeting men in their effort to reduce violent crime, or are they simply doing their job? I don't feel the need to answer that one for you, but based on the logic presented by the mainstream media, we should all be screaming that the police force is sexist and is unfairly targeting men. See how ridiculous that sounds? I certainly hope so. So when I say that 13% of the United States population is responsible for 50% of the murders, wouldn't you agree that we probably need to have a concerted effort to reduce this type of statistical disparity? That maybe we should channel the efforts of our police force in the direction of this type of anomaly? Perhaps more importantly, we should figure out the root cause of this type of violence and work to prevent it. The statistics are clearly showing that Black people are committing a disproportionate number of violent crimes. therefore resulting in more interactions with police officers from a statistical standpoint. Yet the question remains, are they unfair victims of police brutality? Let's take a deeper dive into some statistics from Ben Shapiro's recent video about why systemic racism doesn't exist in policing. Number one, Black people were 20% less likely to be shot at by police than white people between 2000 and 2015. Number two, 1.7 times more likely to die at the hands of police as a white person than a Black person. Police are 3 times less likely to fire at an unarmed Black man than at an unarmed white man. So we've created this culture where police officers are scared to do their job for fear of being called a racist pig. Number 4, for every Black person killed by a white police officer in the United States, there are 71 Black people killed by other Black people. So don't Black Lives Matter here too? Or do they? Number 5, Black people do in fact get pulled over for traffic stops more, but it's because they commit a disproportionate number of traffic offenses. Makes sense. Stop and frisk opponents say that Black people are unfairly targeted, but statistics actually show that they are underrepresented in stop and frisk incidents when compared with actual crime rates. In the blog, there's a full list of these statistics if you're curious as to why this notion of systemic racism is simply a lie. So these are, like I said, simply statistical facts. And as Ben Shapiro often says, facts don't care about your feelings. The media has taught the general public to actually believe that white cops are unfairly targeting Black people when studies prove over and over again that this is not the case. Police officers are actually far more hesitant to pull the trigger, even when they need to, for fear of facing extreme public ridicule, having their reputation tarnished, being stripped of their career and livelihood, and having their name plastered all over the headlines of CNN as just another racist white cop. It's pathetic. And Harvard professor Richard Fryer has categorically shown that racial biases do not exist in the police force. Think about how difficult it must be to be a police officer. And now we've created this atmosphere that actually puts the safety of police officers in jeopardy. This is the absolute truth. When a police officer should pull the trigger, but hesitates to do so, the risk of losing his or her own life for fear of being called a racist is a ridiculous notion that must be eliminated. If we don't eliminate this narrative, we are going to lose so many brave men and women who would have become great police officers, but now refuse to do so because the job simply isn't worth the risk. The fact is that we are indicting an entire police force because of the actions of a couple of awful human beings. Do we do this in every other industry? Are all bankers bad because of Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme? Obviously not. So how is this fair to the brave men and women who put their life on the line to protect us day in and day out? It's not. The George Floyd incident is a perfect example that shows how quickly we are to indict an entire group in our country based on a single video. The video is awful. We all agree on that. But there is no evidence whatsoever that this event was racially motivated. But the mainstream media tells us it was, so we must believe them because it simply must be true. Or better yet, Colin Kaepernick takes a knee, wears a pair of socks with pigs dressed in police uniforms, and we all instantly believe that the police force is an organized effort to suppress Black people and perpetuate this idea of systemic racism. I call bullshit. Instances of racism do not suggest systemic racism, and that's the truth. NASCAR driver Bubba Wallace screaming at the top of his lungs that a noose was placed in his garage as a targeted effort of racism, and that anybody who even remotely challenges the act is a racist themselves, does not prove systemic racism yet again. This elaborate hoax is only symbolic of one thing. Racism in the United States is so non-existent that we actually have to manufacture events to get people to believe in it. Wallace never even saw the rope, yet he was the most adamant supporter of his own injustice. What's worse is that the sentiment in the country was almost that of disappointment when it was confirmed that this was not an instance of racism, much less systemic racism. Why would that be? I find it very peculiar when somebody adamantly screams racism, 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 and then is disappointed that it wasn't an instance of racism. It shows that there is some sort of ulterior motive taking place behind the scenes. I know instances like this give you woke white liberals something to get all riled up about. Some reason to act like a toddler throwing a temper tantrum while you scream Black Lives Matter. I know it probably makes you feel like you're making a difference, but in reality, you're just making yourselves look like idiots. I'm sorry to break it to you. You're part of the problem. In fact, you're a big part of the problem. I've mentioned in previous blog posts, I do not support Black Lives Matter. When somebody screams this phrase at you, it's an insinuation of guilt that I, in no way, shape, or form, support. It's reverse psychology. It's a smear tactic. It's a way for somebody to call you a racist without actually calling you one, all the while propping themselves up to appear as though they are supporting some noble and altruistic cause. Once again, it's bullshit. This is what we're facing in our country right now. Systemic racism simply doesn't exist. And I've asked countless people to provide concrete evidence, examples and sources of laws and or institutional policies that are actively discriminating against Black people. If you can provide one, let's hear it. If one exists, let's work together to eliminate it. Otherwise, let's just shut the hell up about this systemic racism in our country and just become better people and become a better country. Let's start focusing on the real problem that we have here in America. Yes, poverty is part of it, but poverty is simply a function of the expanded welfare state that I mentioned in the beginning of the blog. And it's gaining a frightening amount of momentum here in the USA. I will discuss more on this in a future post. So that's it. Thank you all for tuning in. Like this video, share it, comment. If you agree, disagree, I don't care. Feel free to comment. Be respectful. I'll be respectful myself. And keep an eye out for future videos. And thank you all for tuning in.